please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Education is the silver bullet. Education is everything. We don't need little changes. We need gigantic, monumental changes. Schools should be palaces. Competition for the best teachers should be fierce. They should be making six-figure salaries. Schools should be incredibly expensive for government and absolutely free of charge to its citizens, just like national defense. Hello everyone, welcome back to a Megon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today we're going to be talking about, if the quote wasn't obvious enough, education. More notably in America, because the UK we don't have as much of a say, the parents don't especially, in their children's education, unless it involves faith, in which case suddenly the parents come out of the woodwork. Well, a community does. Not many others do, they can't be asked. I think they realise when they compare to education back from where they came from, the quality is still vastly improved. The opportunity is there for their children to do better than them. Then again, that applies to anyone who is born in the UK. As the generations go by, the education quality typically is supposed to improve, although recent A-level results have indicated that's not necessarily the case anymore, because some are taking rather pathetic A-levels, so they can go and be career activists. How practical. We're going to focus on America because there are a couple of things that have been taking place in the States that have gotten a lot of attention on places like Twitter or X. These things are usually covered by libs of TikTok. If you don't like libs of TikTok and you take issue that I'm now going to cite them for this video, you can take a big F-U-C-K and find yourself away, because I don't give a fuck what you think. When the information is accurate, it doesn't matter who it comes from, it is still information. And there are some key points they raise, whether you like it or not. If you can't stand your opinions being challenged, that sounds an awful lot like a you problem. So we'll start with breaking. After we exposed the adult books in Fort Worth ISD and they were removed, the person in charge of the library catalogue was terminated, and they're also doing a full review of all books in the schools. Kids will no longer be subjected to adult content in schools. Huge W. The first image included is the original Libs of TikTok tweet. The second is an article that does confirm the libraries are shut down while the district does a full assessment of the books on their shelves. The three books removed were Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe, Flamer by Mike Curato, and Wait What? By Heather Karina. They have been deemed, understandably, not appropriate for elementary or middle school student library collections. The decision is based on the examination and adherence to the FWISD, Fort Worth ISD, Selection Criteria Guidelines and District EF. The books were then transferred to the Professional Learning Catalogue with limited access for staff only. There are many books that many parents will believe are not appropriate for children. One that's titled Genderqueer for children makes no sense. The second book, Flamer, is about a boy in a Boy Scouts summer camp who is bullied for his appearance, including acting in a manner considered to be stereotypical of gay men. It is considered the main topical themes of the book, toxic masculinity and homophobia, none of which are remotely relevant to children. The third book is a book about relationships, bodies and growing up, again not remotely appropriate for middle or primary school children. To move on from that, we now need to talk about teachers themselves. I earlier referenced a quote. The reason why is because I fully agree with that quote. My belief is that when it comes to education, the competition should be fierce for the best teachers. Everything else about the teacher beyond their teaching ability is irrelevant. If you're trying to use it as a point of representation in all walks of society, you don't need to make it such a one-dimensional aspect of your three-dimensional body, or make it such a focal point. It is redundant to me. Oh, but we're teaching respect. Okay. We're also teaching kids that even in adulthood apparently play pretend still exists. And when a teacher is being spoken to by a student, they either use your name or they use a title. Respect and boundaries, right? Nothing about the teacher's personal life is remotely relevant. It really isn't in a professional setting. So we're going to go to a video that was tweeted by Libs of TikTok where the teacher talks about their pronouns and identity. And I'd love to know what you think about this, but we are going to respond to it as well.
Story time. So I first came out to my students as non-binary in 2015 when I was a paraeducator in a high school in Maryland.
Dumb question inbound, but why did you need to share that you are non-binary with your high school students? If you're now going to say because that might help them to come out, that is not your place. It really isn't. But do continue.
In the fall of 2016, I was student teaching in my master's program, and I faced my first incidents of transphobia impacting my career. I assigned a news article to my students about Trans Day of Remembrance. The next week, my advisor told me the principal of the high school where I was student teaching had asked that I be removed from my placement.
Do you suppose that at that school, in that context, you had raised a subject that is quite dark, serious, severe, and the parents had felt it was not appropriate to subject children to such a subject? And by extension, can you really consider that a transphobic experience in education?
Because a parent had sent an email saying that they did not want their child in class with me. The parent claimed that I was pushing a liberal agenda by forcing kids to use alternate pronouns for me.
Well, you're not going to find many Republican types who do that, so I guess it does fall within the bracket of liberal agenda. Without knowing what state you're in, one would not know what kind of education system you were a part of at that point. If it was something more conservative leaning, you were pushing a button on purpose. I've noticed this with some teachers that I've covered here and on Rumble, that are in Florida, trying to push the somewhat liberal agenda, and then end up getting fired for pushing something that runs counter to what the governor has ruled is acceptable within his state, or the state he governs. But at the same time, it's less a political issue, and there is still a possibility the subject matter might not be appropriate for children. And in before someone says, but we teach about the Holocaust. Yes, we do. Don't compare the two.
I was obviously indignant to my core, and my advisor was very supportive, but ultimately the university allowed it to happen, and they made me do another student teaching placement the following spring.
As we are using anecdotal evidence to make a rather important point, I would now like to use my own anecdotal evidence of experience in academia. Back when I was a wee whippersnapper and I was at university, I did something called the Student Associate Scheme. For 2 weeks I taught at a school. I did it for 2 consecutive years in fact, when I was only meant to do it for 1. I got paid £600. It was fantastic in a secondary school setting. I hate students and children in general, they're dickheads. I was one too. It was a laugh. At no point did gender or pronoun become a part of the discussion because my job was to teach. That was it. When someone said something in my direction, I told them to use my name. Rather than sir or miss, I simply said use Omegon. Much simpler, less hassle, because a name is vastly more unique than this pronoun crap, alright? But I'm not surprised you bent the knee, because you had no bloody choice. If you wanted to get somewhere in life, you have to play the game. Quitter.
That caused me to graduate a semester later than I should have.
That sounds like an awful lot like a you problem, and a case of if you feck around, you find out. More commonly known as a consequence. I've been trying to teach people, my nieces especially, the very concept, the idea of a consequence. They exist in literally everything, positive, neutral, and negative. Yet many people seem to think they're above it. If you can't be asked to play the game, to get through life and get the most out of it, hyper-focusing on things that are asinine, you're not going to go very far and you're going to be held back. Congratulations on being held back and proving my point.
One of the many ways that transphobia can negatively impact a person's career.
Bitch, that's not transphobia. It really isn't. That is a parent requesting your removal for pushing an idea they don't agree with. Parents are vitally important in ensuring the education remains as much a part of what you guys do as what they say is acceptable for their children to learn about. If the parents have no voice, you have too much control. That becomes a case of grooming.
Fortunately, that second placement was in an amazingly supportive school where I got to work with the GSA, and I got to experience teaching in a school that affirmed my trans identity for the first time. But I had learned the hard way that even in a place with non-discrimination policies, transphobes can weaponize their privilege and their fake outrage to harm trans people's careers.
They didn't harm your career. You made a choice to push an agenda the parents in that district did not agree with. That does not make them transphobic at all, by the way. it means you're easily offended by something you should not have been pushing a button on in the first place. In this case, this particular user has gone on to become a middle school teacher. Not my place to judge whether or not you're good for the job or anything like that, but I was trying to work out or go through your content to find out which school, or which state perhaps, you were teaching in. After a brief Google search, I was either given Montgomery County Education Association or Maryland. Ultimately, it didn't matter. I was more curious to see whether or not it was a more progressive region or somewhere where you were trying to push the button on purpose. But congratulations on your more recent appearances on TikTok looking like every single cliche you could be. The final thing I want to cover, shared by Libs of TikTok, concerns Homer Community Consolidated School District 33C. At Homer 33C just hired this person as an elementary school teacher. These are some of he/they's posts. Would you be comfortable with this person teaching your kids? This is the included image. Chris Robin is, yeah, okay, we've got some satanic stuff, don't care, but it's the part at the top right. I have bipolar 1 disorder with mania and psychosis. This condition has drastically changed my life for better and worse. Because of it, I suffer from irrational thought processes which make my fears and anxieties triple. In an education setting, no. The F the police, not a fan of either. The second tweet. Homer33C hired this individual as an elementary school teacher. He claims to suffer from mania and psychosis which can lead him to be violent and hurtful. Image. The further earlier description with the line, I have done things in conditions of psychosis and mania that have been violent and hurtful. The final thing, breaking. Homer33C superintendent just put out a statement saying they are aware of the concerns surrounding this teacher and are investigating. Here is the statement. As you may have heard or seen online, there's been some question and concern with regards to 33C hiring protocol and details surrounding the conditions of hire for new employees. While the district cannot speak on matters of personnel or individual employees, I do want parents to know that I have heard your concerns, understand the issues highlighted by the community, and am investigating the situation. Our utmost concern is for the continued safety and well-being of our students and staff, and will continue to ensure that all employees are held to the same high standard of professionalism that Homer 33C has come to be known for. To be honest, when the psychosis part was mentioned, the instant response would more than likely have been better for optics to put that person on leave for a bit, or confirm whether that has been addressed enough that it is no longer a concern. But what do I know? I'm not a teacher. It's a fascinating response though, I'll give you that. In the context of what you now know though concerning the person in question, do you think this individual should be allowed to teach in a classroom of children? I'm going to give an opinion because I don't really do it that often. In the context of the psychosis and mania, the answer is no, without knowing whether or not it has been treated or they have gotten to a point where it is no longer a concern and they have passed multiple checks. But my main reason for saying no is because of my earlier quote. Education should be fierce and the best teachers should be in the room. I'm not saying they're not the best, I'm saying you could do better.